Hey everybody, welcome back to Required Reading. I know it's been just a little bit of time. We've been focusing on one of our other shows here at Channel 42, but now we're back and we're going to give you an extra large bonus episode. So this is going to be chapters 16, 17, and 18 here on Required Reading. Of course, this is the novelization of the movie Gremlins 2, The New Batch. That's a novelization created by David Bishop, based on the characters by Charlie Haas, and of course, the characters created by Chris Columbus, and the script written by Charlie Haas. So again, this is chapter 16. In the splice of life, the cheerful lab technicians worked away on their fun projects, unaware of the chaos that was slowly spreading through the building like fire fusing up towards the big ball of TNT. Martin and Lewis, the Siamese twins separated only physically, stood over their long table juggling test tubes, vials, and petri dishes like circus freaks let loose in a high school science lab. Their colleague, Wally, came over to them, carrying a tomato and a handball glove. Wally said,
"Take a look at this, guys. You know how I've been working on making these tomatoes tart for when they ship them?"
Wally slipped on the glove. He flipped the tomato up into the air and then caught it. He slammed it into the wall like a handball, caught it on a bounce, and then showed it to the twins. It wasn't smushed one little bit. Lewis said, "That's terrific, Wally." "Top notch," finished Martin. "How do they taste?"
"That's the best part," said Wally. "We've already had calls from the chefs at 2 of the airlines."
Suddenly a burp sounded from behind them, the burp that changed all their lives. They turned to see that a bunch of gremlins had overrun one of the lab tables, peering out over the lovely and interesting labscapes. New worlds to conquer. Now, they had all seen odd things before in their careers, but never quite as odd as these things. They looked like something out of a nightmare. "Oh my gosh," said Lewis. "Did somebody leave something out?" said Martin.
"Not me,"
Wally said.
"Hey, my vegetable medley!"
For the naturally inquisitive little demons had moved their scaly and unpleasant selves away from their perches and were exploring the various experimental projects. One had jumped up near the vegetable plants with the tubes. He grabbed the tube and ate it all.
"No, my experiment!"
cried Wally. The gremlin grinned evilly, but then his expression changed. He looked like a comic's parody of a drunk who has just taken a shot of very strong liquor. He did a double take, and then the gremlin started changing. The lab boys hadn't seen anything like it since they videotaped a tomato plant over a week period on time exposure. Before their startled eyes, the gremlin's ears turned into leafy clumps of romaine lettuce, bushy and green. The creature seemed to thoroughly enjoy the process, his eyes turning a queasy color of carrot orange and kale green. "No!" cried Wally, as the thing, wanting more of this great fun, reached out for another vial of delicious formula. A claw raked out, and Wally jumped back with a torn shirt and scratches down the front of his chest and arm. Okay, take it already." The gremlin grinned, chuckled, and then grabbed a huge beaker marked cauliflower, guzzling it with gusto. The gremlin burped, a gust of its breath smelling like V8 juice after too long in the sun. It started rocking back and forth, and suddenly clumps of sickly mutated cauliflower commenced to sprout from its chest, its lips, and its nose like a diseased garden. Nearby, another little monster snagged a beaker marked sex hormone. It downed it quickly, and its face registered immense consumer satisfaction almost immediately. My God! The guzzling activities of the vile creatures ceased for a moment, their ugly faces swiveling to look over at the new arrival. It was Dr. Catheter, removing his glasses, his hair about a shade whiter and his jaw significantly lowered with astonishment. With giggles and snarls of amusement, the carnage and guzzling continued a space. As the doctor stood in the doorway, one particularly large specimen of gremlin grabbed the beaker that had been attached to a bulbous brain floating in a nutrient bath. The gremlin drank down at least a quart of the noxious turquoise stuff. Martin cried, "Oh, no! Not the brain hormone," finished Lewis. The spasm hit the gulping gremlin at about 7.1 on the Richter scale. It began to tremble, its eyes bugging and bobbling, its tongue waggling and gaggling. It fell over on its back, rolled off the counter, and fell headfirst into a trash can. Its legs twitched. The can fell over, and the gremlin pushed its way out of it. Now perched upon a noble nose was a pair of horn-rimmed glasses. Its lips moved, struggling to emit something. "I want to." The gremlin jumped to its feet, his eyes suddenly awake and aware, gleaming with intelligence. It began to speak with a cultured voice, rather like George Plimpton in a high raconteur mode. "I want to talk a little bit about what's going on here in this room, because I think there are some fascinating ramifications here for the future." Its arms moved about in a high didactic fashion, as though lecturing in front of a large audience. "When you introduce genetic material of research quality to a life form such as ours, which is possessed of a sort of, I hesitate the word atavism, but let us say a highly aggressive nature." For a moment, the other gremlins seemed interested with this abrupt change in their fellow, but only a moment. Soon they grew bored and went back to trashing the place and eating and drinking their fill, as the scientists tried in vain to stop this horrible rampage. "For example, that fellow over near there, I believe that's a common bat of the order Chiroptera, that only true mammal, I might add, capable of true flight." One of the proliferating gremlins approached the cage of the bat who was Wally's pet project, the one who was being desensitized to light. Connected to the bat's cage by a series of tubing was yet another vial. Being forever thirsty, the gremlin grabbed it and drained it in several quick gulps. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde time again. The gremlin stretched out a hand, surprised and delighted to find a huge expanse of webbing growing between its arm and its side. Both arms. Articulated yet. The newly intelligent gremlin cocked its head in a vastly amused fashion and stalked over to its newly changed brother. "Nice wings, might I have a brief word with you?" The bat gremlin grinned and looked at Mr. Glasses. "My friend, you have potential. I want to help you be all that you can be. May I?" As he continued talking, Mr. Glasses plucked the intravenous tube from the bat's body and happily jammed the needle into the bat gremlin's skin. The bottle with the sunshine logo drained quickly, jacking the gremlin full of its hormone and sunscreen mixture. The bat gremlin's eyes opened, wide, wide, wide. "As I'm sure you're aware, sunlight poses a problem for our ethnic group. We don't tan, we don't burn, frankly, we just become a rather unappetizing sort of photochemical leftover. Thus this formula, specifically designed for those of the nocturnal persuasion, to make bright light no problem whatever. That will be of crucial usefulness where you'll be going." Mr. Glasses yanked the IV needle out of the bat gremlin's elbow. The bat gremlin seemed very enthusiastic at the prospect of unlimited flight in the sunlight. He tilted his head as though asking, "So where do I get to go, boss?" "You have wings, my friend," said Mr. Glasses like a pronouncement. "Flap them." The wings flapped, and they flapped with a muscularity and power that within moments pulled it aloft. It floated and flapped about the room, clearly thrilled and excited to be gifted with the power of flight. The scientist tried to grab it, but to no avail. "Down, down!" cried Lewis and Martin. "To the window, my friend," cried Mr. Gremlin in a vastly encouraging fashion. "A world of possibilities opens itself to you. Throw off the old constraints." The bat gremlin hurled itself towards one of the polarized windows, its eyes full of purpose and challenge. "There it is, the apple!" cried Mr. Glasses, like a British coach urging his football boys to catch great new heights of achievement. "This city's so nice they named it twice. Check it out one time, won't you?" And the Bat Gremlin slammed into the window, smashing through it and out into the air, above the New York streets. It flapped its wings and it swooped around, a bird released from its cage and crazy with evil joy at its release. So much havoc to wreak, so much fun to accomplish, and not only did the bright spring day sun not bother it, but he actually enjoyed it, leaving behind its humble origins, the newly freed winged off above the streets and buildings of New York City. Down below in a park, a pigeon perched upon a lion statue in front of the New York Public Library. A gob of green goo slammed from above, killing the poor thing instantly. Chapter 17. Fred Finlay was taping his show again. He wasn't in a very good mood either. For one thing, his beat-up old radio clock hadn't gone off this morning on time, and when it had, somehow the tuner had been changed over to a shock rock radio show. Fred Finlay hated rock and roll. Then the water had gone cold in his shower, he'd cut himself a good one shaving, and the milk had gone off in his refrigerator so that his much-needed cup of coffee had given him absolutely awful heartburn that not even his usual bottle of Maalox could hurt. And now this stupid costume was riding up on him and his makeup itched. So what the hell else could go wrong today? "Tonight, we got a classic horror movie from Grandpa Fred's Special Dungeon." He picked up 2 film canisters and blew special effects dust off them. Grandpa Fred was interrupted by a long moan. It wasn't the weak moan from before. No, not by a long shot. It was a genuinely scary fingernails on the blackboard creaking crypt door inner sanctum style moan. Startled that something should go right this crummy day, Fred Finlay turned around. Now, Fred Finlay had seen some pretty weird things in his day. Even before he'd moved to the house of freaks that was New York City, he'd traveled the world in the Navy and seen some pretty odd things in obscure Far East, Indian, and African ports from Honolulu to Timbuktu. He was an old coot, Fred was, and he'd pretty much given up on seeing anything that could startle him. But he had to hand it to these things that rose up from behind the gravestones amidst the dry ice ground fog. These guys spooked the hell out of him. They looked like most of his wife's relatives, God help him, only a little smaller. He gawked for a moment, then turned back to the control booth and jammed a thumb back over his shoulder, about to ask the director what the story was with these things. The director said, "Fred, what's the story with those things?" I don't... One of the gremlins, for guess what, that's what they were, grabbed a reel of film from Fred. He pulled it out and held it up against the light. Fake, terrified shock washed over the thing's face. It clutched its heart in a fake heart attack and then keeled over onto the floor. The other creatures laughed uproariously, slapping their knees and knocking each other on the back. That's right," said Grandpa Fred. "It's pretty scary." Abruptly, Grandpa Fred was joined by the other 2 gremlins. They leaped up on him and put their heads to either side of his, making scary snarls and generally mugging for the camera. It was clear that they felt in their element here. "Boy, that's creepy," said the director. "Okay, rolling." Fred finally didn't know quite what to do. They'd never taught him this might happen to him in TV or drama school. Oh well, this after all was show business, and so far this was shaping into the absolute best Grandpa Fred bit yet. He said, blinking towards the red light at the top of the television camera. "Grandpa Fred and his friends have something horrible in store for you tonight." The Gremlins bobbed their heads in cheerful agreement. On the second floor of the Arboretum Mall was the Token, Fern, and Yuppie bar, the Stuffed Olive. Sitting around sipping beers, or in most cases Perrier and lime, or just straight mineral water with a twist. These generally were not clamp workers. Clamp workers were afraid to be spotted by Foster in the bar. No, these were other workers from other offices in the center, or just tourists. The clamp workers went elsewhere for truly serious drinking. Right now, the few patrons of the bar could have watched a TV set suspended above the central island of metal-spouted liquor bottles. On this TV was a late morning news report. A bland newscaster in a dark suit stared out through the tube. "There are reports today," he reported, "of major mechanical problems at the Clamp Center office building. Reached by Hotline News, a spokesman for developer Daniel Clamp says there's nothing to worry about, that these are just normal glitches that a new building goes through in the first few months." Turning to sports, right next door to the bar was a salad bar. Early lunchers were lined up for their low-cal roughage. "My broker says the strongest things in the economy right now are cigarettes and men's magazines," said one patron, a matronly woman. "Really?" said another, trapped but totally without interest. "Of course, he's been in jail for a while now." The woman reached down under the salad bar's germ guard with plastic tongs to pull a clump of lettuce from the bin. Instead of a clump of lettuce, she found herself pulling up the vegetable's mutant gremlin. By now, the thing was truly a sight. It had radishes for eyes, cornrow hair, cauliflower ears, string bean lips, and a darting wax paper tongue. The other customers recoiled, horrified. The woman tried to pull away, but the veggie gremlin bared its sharp artichoke teeth, reached out with its carrot fingers, and pulled her into the vegetable hell through the germ guard. Back in the Clamp Cable Studios, another show was taping. The previous year, Clamp had hired a respected movie critic to host his own movie review show, The Movie Police, part of the growing American trend towards respect for the nuclear family. Lester Leeds was taping a video show reporting on an old video presently getting attention. He had just finished the latest edition of his Every Movie Ever Made Plus for Clamp Publishing and was just getting deeply into his sex manual, Making It in the Balcony. So it was a relief to get away from his grueling work and under the bright lights of a studio. Things were getting so bad for poor Lester that he had to ask projectionists to speed up films so that he could get them all in. Today he felt especially happy. He had some real trash to review, and nothing pleased the critic more than to tear apart a film with ripping words and summarily and metaphorically discarding it in the celluloid trash bin. Lester held up a video cassette as though he had just picked a particular noisome dead fish up from the garbage. "And now for a video cassette consumer watch." It was none other than the much-maligned but brilliant watershed effort of cinematic magnificence second only to Citizen Kane in film history, Gremlins. Alas, this wretched critic did not care for it. "Here's one that's just been re-released on video, and if you're thinking of renting it, I can think of a lot better things to do with $3. Poor Lester Leeds. Little did he realize it, but 3 actual genuine real McCoy gremlins were sneaking up on him, giggling silently and mugging for the cameras. Such as burning them. In fact, burning this movie wouldn't be a bad idea. This is a truly evil, mean-spirited... I don't think there's a single scene more wretched than when poor Mrs. Deagle gets ejected from her automatic chair through her own window into the annals of film history, unless it's that bit of monologue about the girl's father caught in the chimney at Christmas time. Awful. Don't these people know that Christmas is a sacred holiday? Boy, these guys are truly mentally disturbed. In fact, The gremlins leaped upon the nasty and quite wrong critic, dragging him off the couch. Leeds turned around in mid-plunge to see the creatures intent on mauling, and he figured maybe he'd opened his mouth once too often.
Wait, no, I was kidding. Look!
He pushed up his thumbs. 2 thumbs up! 2 thumbs... And in Hollywood, producers roared their approval. Chapter 18. Down in the Clamp Center's mall, a small stock brokerage, Bucks, Junkie, and Jolly, operated out of a very small set of cubicles, known merely as a euphemistic business station even to its owners. At his desk, Harry Mishkin, a broker from Teaneck, New Jersey, was trying to unload some questionable utility stocks on a real rube from Long Island. Suddenly, however, he found himself confronted by a demonic-looking creature who rather reminded him of the way his head felt after the Black Monday crash of '87. He opened his mouth to say hello, but only "Ah!" came out.
"What's wrong?"
said a voice of the frightened client over the phone.
"Oh my God, the market's crashed again. Oh my God, and all my money's in junk bonds."
No crash here. Oh, geez, no problem. Think about those stocks. Oh, geez, bye. He hung up. Harry Mishkin had looked at some nasty clients over his martinis at his power lunches, but this guy took the cake. The thing stuck up an accusing claw towards Mishkin's fire engine red tie. Mishkin started yanking it off. If this thing wanted his tie, it could have it. But the thing seemed not so intent on things as in creating general mayhem. The gremlins swiped at him, and Mishkin dodged. Other gremlins swarmed in, kicking the brokers out of their offices, grabbing their phones and screaming, "Buy, sell, buy, sell!" Mishkin tried to run, but he tripped and fell into the supervisor's office. The supervisor had long since vacated his office, and there was one of the monsters from Wall Street hell, this one with glasses and a phone in one hand. "Oh, yes," the gremlin was saying into the phone. "I'd say it's a full-scale panic. Are you having a run on the bank there yet? Well, it's rather brutal here. We're advising our clients to put everything they've got into canned foods and shotguns." "Yes." Mishkin managed to put himself back on his feet and get the hell out of there, wishing he were high up enough to jump out a window. These things were going to send the stocks and bonds market into a tailspin. Thank God he didn't invest in the things. Kate Barringer, bruised, haggard, and splattered with gremlin blood, managed to make it upstairs to a stairwell door. She opened it. Complete mayhem reigned in the lobby. As panicking customers and office workers tried to flee the swarming gremlins, Kate saw that the things were simply all over the place. Gremlins were on the frozen yogurt stand, shooting streams of whipped cream at fleeing workers. A bartender fell to the floor trying to shake the things off. The vegetable gremlin was absolutely destroying the salad bar. A woman screamed and ducked as a gremlin swung towards her on a sparkling electric cable torn from the ceiling. People in general were desperately scrambling towards the exit doors, but tripping up like crazy, for the place had been crashed into a veritable obstacle course. Kate took momentary cover behind a pillar, gathering her nerve. Then she made a break across the lobby, running for a fire alarm on the back wall. Abruptly, a gremlin jumped out in front of her. She was quite prepared to do battle using what little she knew about the kung fu course she'd taken at the Y. But the gremlin didn't seem interested in fighting. He wore a gray raincoat, and as soon as he stepped out in front of her, he flung it open, flashing her. Kate, disgusted, used a kung fu kick to clear the way and then jumped for the red alarm. She pulled it, expecting a loud clanging or, at the very least, some sort of ringing. But no, not in the Clamp Center. Instead, melodramatic music built under a voice that sounded like the guy on PBS's Nature Show. "Giver of warmth, destroyer of forests, right now this building is on fire." Upstairs, an office worker, unaware of the chaos below, was traveling along. He stopped to listen, totally baffled. "What?" "Yes, the building is on fire. Leave the building. Enact the age-old drama of self-preservation." Fire! Cried another worker. Fire! General panic swept through the entire skyscraper. Elsewhere in New York City, the Futtermans were enacting the age-old ritual of tourism. Since Sheila Futterman was a real fan of the Gothic architecture, she had really wanted to see the famous Cathedral of St. Eva Marie on Fifth Avenue. Murray Futterman wasn't so thrilled. Murray didn't particularly care to go out into the open much. After the war, Murray never did particularly have good nerves, and after that awful business back in Kingston Falls with the Gremlins driving that snowplow through his place and into him, a lot of people thought he was dead, but he just had a severe case of shock. He mostly just wanted to stay inside and futz with his stamp collection and model airplanes. But he'd been in therapy now for years, and with the love and patience of his dear wife Sheila, he was coming out of it enough so that he could make this trip. Seeing the boys from the old 85th Squadron was important to Murray, damned important, but he sure needed Sheila's support in braving this hurly-burly, topsy-turvy, close-up-in-your-face city. So if Sheila Futterman wanted to go and see the Statue of Liberty, or the Radio City Music Hall, or the Cathedral of St. Eva Marie, or Franklin Grant's tomb for that matter, then by God, Murray Futterman was going to go with her. He didn't have to like it, and he would go around with a sour face and make disparaging remarks, but Sheila deserved the best, the very freaking best. They were standing on the other side of the street now from the cathedral so that Sheila could click off a couple of pictures on her Nikon. Murray, he was much more interested in the shoddy construction work these New York hard-hat bozos were doing on the sidewalk. Cripes, the stuff they were pouring was clearly more sand than cement, and they seemed far more interested in the women's short skirts passing by than in mixing the stuff in their mixer or leveling it downright. Sheesh, made Murray crazy just watching this gross misuse of taxpayers' bucks. Sheila was far too involved in her appreciation of the building before them to pay much attention to this mess beside them.
"Oh, Murray, what a beautiful building," she enthused.
Murray Futterman looked back up to the huge and towering cathedral. It was of dark granite, stark in contrast with the dunnish gray remainder of normal New York. It was an old-style medieval cathedral, complete with flying buttresses and gargoyles, to say nothing of long stretches of stained glass. Of course, in this hellhole of a city, you had to put up bars and wire to protect the glass, so you rather had the effect of a building of God under siege. "Beautiful," said Murray. "Looks like something out of the freaking Dark Ages."
"Well, of course, dear. That's the idea."
"Huh? What's something like that doing in the middle of a city, for God's sakes? It belongs back over the ocean. Boy, did I see a slew of these things bombed out back in a big war."
"That's nice, Murray, but it's getting close to that time when we can take the tour. I've been so looking forward to a tour of the Cathedral of St. Eva Marie, Murray."
"Yeah," said Murray Futterman mordantly. "Maybe we'll get a handout from the poor box. We need it after what I'm paying in this city."
"Murray, look at those lovely gargoyles."
Murray had already looked at the gargoyles, thank you, and he didn't like what he saw, mostly because they reminded him of the G-word things that had almost killed him. He didn't comment on this, he just grunted and turned back at the much more remarkable sight of shoddy hard-hat workers slumming on the job.
"Murray, oh my God, Murray, what's that?"
Murray turned around and looked, expecting maybe to see a mugging in process. Anyway, Murray Futterman didn't expect to be surprised by anything he saw in this crazy city. Murray Futterman was more than surprised, though. He was shocked. One of those stone birds, gargoyles, Sheila called them, the bastard was freaking moving. It had been sitting up there, perched on a corner like its cronies, all still and stony, and now it was flapping its wings alive. Murray opened his mouth, and all that came out was, "Hey!"
"What is it, Murray?"
said Sheila. Oh my God, that awful and familiar face with the ears like Satan's was tilting down, scouring the crowd fiercely. And it was looking straight at Murray Futterman. "No," he said. The thing left its perch. Flapping its bat wings, it dove down towards the crowd, talons outstretched, hellish eyes flaring. "It's them!" cried Murray Futterman. "It's them!" He turned around, hands held out imploringly to the New Yorkers passing by. "Help me! Somebody help me!" It was his absolute worst nightmare come true. Everything he thought he had control of in his life suddenly felt thoroughly shattered, and the New Yorkers totally ignored him, trudging forward in their typical hides of leather New York manner, oblivious. He turned, feeling about ready to have a nervous breakdown, but he didn't have time to do it. The winged gremlin was upon him. "Sheila!" he cried. "Get away, Sheila!" The winged gremlin slashed at his jacket, ripping it. Futterman pushed his wife away to safety, steeled himself, and then gave the gremlin a hard right to the kisser. "Okay, you bastard! You asked for it! You got it!" The blow barely phased the gremlin. It was on Futterman like a cheap suit, fluttering and clawing, pushing him back towards the crowd. It was a scene straight out of one of the Ray Harryhausen Sinbad movies. Futterman grappled with the thing. He grabbed it by the neck and flung it into the churning cement mixer. The creature squealed. The mixer tilted, dumping the gremlin and its load into a larger mass of liquid concrete. The thing struggled in the glop, a while like the swamp thing in his element, some of the wet cement dropping off, but nonetheless, as the bat gremlin flapped aloft, there remained a veneer of wet cement on its body and wings. It forgot its mad and senseless attack on Futterman, lurching instead back towards its previous perch on the cathedral. There it settled, stiffening, until it became a genuine, unmoving gargoyle. Futterman stared at this sight with astonishment, but mostly with a sense of profound accomplishment. He felt as though a gigantic burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He'd done it. He stood up to one of the things, and he'd beaten it. After years of feeling weak and useless, quite suddenly he felt powerful again, in charge. He turned and found his faithful wife Sheila by his side as always. He grabbed her arm and pulled her along towards the east side of town. "Murray, where are you going?" she demanded, clearly not at all recovered from the shocking incident that had just occurred. "To the clamp center," he said. "We have to tell Billy. The gremlins are loose again. Come on." It wasn't far. Together, they started running. All right, thanks, guys, for being with me and for hanging in while we got things together. Hopefully, we can get some more of these out in the near future. I double-checked, and it looks like we've got 24 chapters. So, yeah, we just got a handful more to go. So, in the meantime, be safe out there, enjoy yourselves, be good to each other, and keep reading.
Clamp Cable Network now leaves the air. We hope you have enjoyed our programming, but more importantly, we hope you have enjoyed life.